a couple of points in the book that like I happened to skim past when I was just perusing it. He knows I read this shit, so I mean it's an uphill battle. Hopefully there's a quiz at the end of this that I might be able to fucking luck my way into. But other than that, yeah. So crossovers. I gotta say, I would argue that any crossover that works, you have to play on the imagination on one side or the other. And I feel like when crossovers fuck up, maybe that's where I should pay attention to or focus on for the next 7 minutes, six. I don't know. This is going on. This is gonna, like I said, people, 100 miles distance, 80 miles of gas. But so like I think where crossovers fuck up is like when they try to help both sides or address both sides or make both sides happy. Like so, good example. And maybe again, this is where I can focus because I have no fucking understanding where I'm going to go with this. But where they fuck up is like Freddy versus Jason or all the Alien versus Predators. They keep trying to make both sides happy, and you can't do that. What you have to do is either pick a question that both sides have and you answer it, or you pick one side to please and the other side just understand they're coming for a ride. A lot of these crossovers, especially in pop culture, in the last 4 years kind of happened by accident or because one person was being a little cheeky and trying to sort of insert themselves in areas that didn't necessarily have to be there, or maybe they even really cared. It was kind of like an inside joke, a shout out to a friend in the industry, all these different things. A lot of people love to go to like Raiders Ark, one of the hieroglyphics is a Star Wars thing. So a lot of people I would say that Indiana Jones and Star Wars are in the same universe. It's like, okay, I guess. I mean, we can play around with it. I love to play around with it. We all love to play around with it. That's in part why we're here at the Steam Gentleman. We play around with those ideas. But also you have to understand to a certain extent, that is really us making the story of what the crossover is and not necessarily what the person who originated the idea had in mind. So when we bulldog these things and we create these false expectations and frankly false sort of sense of hope of what it can be, which always leads to the letdown, because then we create the myth around the crossover and that's where the problem kicks in. Same thing with like having a skull that looks like an alien in Predator 2. So then people lose their shit for 20 fucking years and want to see what the crossover is going to be.
And that was pre-Twitter. Think about that. Right?
Yeah.
The 90s. And we just fucking looked at it and just went, and comic books were born and there was no internet, there was no Facebook, no Twitter, but all of that happened, people.
All of that. Exactly. And like, yeah, the Dark Horse comics did a good job of doing their best to try to bridge the gap, but they also could have a lot more freedom when it comes to it, instead of having, at best, maybe 2 hours to try to make the connection work. So that's a lot of times where I think crossovers fuck up. Where I think crossovers work is, as I pointed out a little bit earlier, we can go ahead and stop this episode after Greg, because Greg kind of nails to me a lot of the ways crossovers work. You have to one, have fun. You have to have fun with the understanding of what you're trying to cross over, and fun, to be clear, it doesn't necessarily have to be shared. It's either the filmmaker or the property creators having fun with the idea, and that will come across in the material that they're producing, or they're doing their best to make it fun for the consumer. So you have to do that. So like you have to have an interesting premise that, people are already going to have fun with, even if they're not necessarily going to be entertained right away. So you can go right to like the last thing Greg said, Smurfs but in the USSR setting. Those are two familiar properties. They play around with two vastly different sort of understandings, but also a through line that's also very common, to the point where it's easy for people to land on and kind of go one side or the other, but a shared understanding of moving into the crossover, where then the property creators can either play on and expand into their own understanding and where they want to have fun with the idea, or play on where most of the audience would pretty much understand. Or going with the first example he gave, which, you know, as Josh said, when he shared it with us, we lost our shit because we understand the two properties and what it would end up meaning, regardless of how it actually would result in the final product. You take the X-Men with superior powers, and it's a lot of cases questionable characteristics and decision making. Although to be fair, I'm not sure how I would react if the whole world was counting on me to constantly save them from weird shit. And then you take people who are objectively questionable because they're career criminals who have no problem killing people who are in their way to get basically more money, and Reservoir Dogs, which also then you add in the element of, if you've watched Reservoir Dogs and you understand what we're also saying, is in this crossover, one person is going to be basically the sort of protective authority, i.e., the cop. So, and that person is then you have a whole new play on the crossover that gets even wild and more creative. It's like, oh shit, so how exactly is the cop gonna get ratted out? How is he gonna, you know, get narked? How is he gonna have to confess? What's that gonna look like? Is it going to be like literally, you know, Beast in the back of the car, you know, bleeding out and being like, you know, and then the guy driving be like, I don't know, who would it be? Kitty
Yes.
Pryde? I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, yeah, it would basically just be the X-Men going on a crazy violent caper. And they would all still have their powers, but you know, chances are whoever they're going up against would have their powers. So, you know, instead of, you know, a regular police officer, it might be Toad. Tied to the chair. I mean, and yeah, Wolverine would be dismembering him while listening to K Billy's super sounds of the 70s.
Totally. I mean, it to me, so like again, it goes back to the understanding of which premise are we going to work with. So like if we're adding Reservoir Dogs, then to me, you have to then argue what exactly is going to be the Reservoir Dog part. Is it just that we're now having X-Men in suits and they're just walking around with like the soundtrack of the 70s? Or is it going to be...
Don't tempt me, because I'll write this bitch right now.
Yeah.
Go for it. Go for it. Go for it. But like, or is it like, yes, that, but also now they're in the actual synopsis of Reservoir Dogs. So like now we're also pointing out that the X-Men in this case are bad guys technically, but one is a good guy within it, and he has to sort of figure out how to stop this crime within these superpowered individuals. Or is it like basically you can play it the other way, where you take the people from the Reservoir Dogs, including Chris Penn, Rip, and you put all these guys into X-Men situation where, they're still maybe wearing suits, but they're not doing Reservoir Dog stuff that we've all seen and understand from the premise of the movie, but they're doing X-Men stuff. Like, that's what I'm saying when it comes to crossovers. You have to have fun. You have to have a clear through line of what you want to do, and you have to either pick a side. When the crossovers try to end up trying to work for both sides, it ends up always being a muddled mess. They don't have enough time to explain why they're doing XYZ, which means that a lot of times they're watching, if we're talking movies, we're watching things where you're just asking yourself, why? Like, why is this even happening? Why? Or even if I'm understanding the premise of both sides, why is this happening? You watch AV, Alien vs. Predator, and AVP2. Every single time you're watching that movie, you're just asking yourself why. There's literally no good answer for one or the other existing, even though you may love both properties. That's the point. It's you're always left. Same thing with, like, I go back to what I said, Freddy versus Jason. People were clamoring for this for so long, and all they end up doing is just basically having a movie that didn't even really address either of them. So it's like, what kind of crossover is that? What kind of crossover is that? There's no point for that. You know, I would love to see, if we're talking about having fun with crossovers and really expanding the sides of both properties, like toss the Xenomorph into like the Star Wars universe or the Star Trek universe.
No, if you want, I mean, if you really want to have fun, I mean, you should take like the Xenomorphs and put them in X-Files. Now,
I mean,
we're cooking.
I don't know how
the Xenomorphs in Star Trek.
Yeah, see, I would rather, that's the to me, it'd be cool to see it in the X-Files, but then I'm also like kind of stuck thinking like how much chance do we have to stop these things in the X-Files universe when these things easily would just run through basically that Earth. Whereas the Star Trek one, I feel like we have a little bit more of a chance to have fun with it. I would rather see like things that are also like have a little bit more fun with it in different properties, in the sense of like tossing like the understanding of body snatchers and put in like Saved by the Bell, or like
sounds good,
like you know, like, or put like something like Contagion and put it in like Downton Abbey. I don't know why I said that. I've never watched that show to save my life. Like, or you know, as Greg pointed out, like when they tried GOT things, which funny enough, Greg and I had this conversation about 5 years ago or 6 years ago, where I was pointing out that a lot of shows and movies were understanding that people love actually to see consequence for the characters, and why the MCU has a problem for so many different reasons. So when GOT was coming out, I argue part of the reason why it was able to take over the way it did wasn't because it had boobs, which yes, a lot of unfortunate incels were just, yeah, that's all they needed, death and violence and boobs. But I argue that no, it was because they killed Ned Stark. They let people know right away in this situation, if you're in a situation that you're probably going to die in, you're going to die.
One does not simply kill Sean Bean in the first 10 episodes.
Yeah, I know that's a meme, but fuck me, my man cannot catch a break. Like, is there a property he can be in without fucking
Sean Bean gonna
every property he's in, it gets extended. They're like, oh, cool. So we got this movie where you're gonna be with Harrison Ford, and you're gonna really actually be a sympathetic villain, because when you break down your side of the conflict, it's not so much, you're being a terrorist across the world, and that's not good. But when we understand that you're actually fighting for the freedom of your own country, you kind of become a sympathetic character. You also care about your family, all that good stuff. We're going to put you in that. And Sean Bean's like, cool, is it going to be one movie? And they're like, yeah, it'll be one movie. So they kill his ass off. And then they have 2 more fucking movies. Same thing. It's like, Lord of the Rings. It'll just be one long movie. One long movie? Yeah, don't worry about it, man. We're not, I mean, Vigo just signed up for one. That's all we're doing here. And then Vigo, they do 3 more. It's like Game of Thrones. We're just doing 1 season, like a runoff, like that shit that happened on Showtime or Cinemax a couple of years ago, Pillars of the Earth. That was kind of cool. Yeah, I signed up for that. 1 season, maybe 2. Maybe 2, maybe 3, but don't worry about it, man. We'll talk about it forever. Fucking 8 seasons. Like, my man cannot catch a goddamn break.
I want to I think we all need to give RaShaun a golf clap just right there, because my man started off in front of the classroom saying, so there was war, and then there was peace. And the war was bad and the peace was good, and it was in Russia. So I just wanted to start off by giving you a little
You're giving me too much credit, because there's no way in the world I would have said it was in Russia. I would probably just be like, Eurasia? Eurasia is an actual thing, people. I'm getting credit where I can get it.
It's an actual thing. It was
to touch on the, you have to have the right combination for a mashup. Like, the easiest was probably like, like say if you did a Scooby-Doo Hellraiser thing, like you have just all of the, sexual jokes and puns and weed jokes and puns that have been made about Scooby-Doo. And then you have the absolutely dark, gruesome horror of Hellraiser. So it's also when you have these things that are just starkly different, but there's something about both of them that where you can have like a real interplay. I mean, because first of all, you would have Scooby-Doo and the gang actually run into some serious ass demons. So there's that.
There is that. Yeah.
Secondly,
so
there's, like I said,
the
there's
mascot would be the face. So
exactly. It's not coming off. So say you wanted to do something like Natural Born Killers versus Fight Club. You know, like you wanted to bring the two of those things together somehow. You know, like you have to find out, like, where is the meat? Like, do you really just want to see Mickey get in a fist fight with Tyler Durden?